Welcome to episode one of a show. I am not sure what I want to name it yet, but basically, over the process of these videos, I want to try and give back to wrestling, whether it be somebody who's already wrestling with experience, somebody who's fresh out of training, currently training, looking to train, or even fans if they want to have a little bit more insider knowledge of how things work. And yes, I went back and forth whether I should make these videos or not. But I'm pretty confident that the world knows that wrestling is predetermined. They know that we go to a training school, we learn how to do these things properly and to not harm ourselves. And realize how I said predetermined, not fake, because I know at 35 and 20 years, my body, if this is fake, my body shouldn't feel this way. And I'm sure there's many wrestlers out there who are more experienced than I that are in much worse pain than me. So fake is not a word I like to use, but there is a science, a special way to do things. And I think that's what's lost. And why I think it's lost is because of how wrestling has changed. And I think there's a lot of changes within wrestling and some that people don't understand. I feel like there's a separation in wrestling. The new stars and the older generation of stars and personalities. There's always conflict between these two. What's right and what's wrong? And in my eyes, there's not necessarily right and wrong in wrestling. Obviously, there is a wrong way to do things, but I think it's very difficult to get to wrong. I think there's many different right ways to do things. But at the baseline, I think there is a better way of explaining to the crowd what we're doing through our body language, through our facial expressions, and through how much importance we put on everything we do in the wrestling ring. And what I mean by that is when I circle around, to me, that's just as important as a sequence later in the match that I hope when we double down off of, the crowd starts going, "This is awesome," or "Fight forever." Those two details are equally as important in the big picture to me. And the issue I feel that has happened in wrestling is there's not territories. And what I mean by that is you would often wrestle somebody 5-6 nights a week and kind of get in a rhythm. And that person is usually more experienced than the territory days because their job is to help you learn. So instead of getting thrown out there and wrestling 2, maybe 3 times a week, which is a normal schedule for most people, and wrestling people who are coming out of the same training school as you, had as much experience as you, you're not in that constant learning, right? And I also feel through my experience in car rides, it's almost like people don't want to talk about wrestling. It's like, well, we're going to wrestling and we're going to do wrestling and I'm a wrestler, so let's not talk about wrestling in the car. But if you listen to anybody who I would list as a great, they always said they learned more in the car. And that's, breaking down the matches on the card, whether it be yours or not. Something I would like to do is when I was done a show and took students, whether they were on the show or not, I always asked them to watch as much of the show as they could, because I like to watch as much of the show as I could. And in the car, we would ask, what did you think was the best match? Why did you think was the worst match? And why these things, right? And I think that's an important learning experience, and that's something that I don't feel everybody's getting. One, because we're not wrestling as often, and two, we're not talking as often about wrestling, I feel. And maybe that's just an issue that I came across, but I feel that that's been an issue that's been expressed a lot of times. And the people who really, truly live, eat, sleep, and breathe wrestling, I think that they have a different way of looking at things. I'm a huge fan of guys like Will Ospreay, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks. But I also think somebody like Jim Cornette, now just listen to me before you say that I'm preaching Jim Cornette. I think that Jim Cornette has some very valuable assets he can give to wrestling, but unfortunately, you kind of have to dive through everything he says if you're willing to listen to all that and pick out what's valuable and what's invaluable to you. And I also think that happens with the new generation. They have some advice that's very valuable, but it's also some input that I might not agree with. And maybe you watching this don't agree with it. And I think that's something that wrestlers and wrestling personalities need to learn. Wrestlers mostly are getting taught, and then they're going out to work. And when they go out to work, We're not having somebody that we're married to on the road for 2 months every night, learning what they know. And we have to pick out advice. And I don't know how many times I've heard, listen, slow down. You're doing too much. Or what about this one? And this one's important because I'll cover it in this video. You know when people circle around the ring and one will kind of do a spin? You ever heard from your opponent or somebody that's a veteran or a veteran in the locker room, well, you turned your back on me, kid. I would have knocked your lights out there. And to a certain degree, yes, that is what should happen. But why should that happen is the problem. We're getting taught, shown how to perform moves, how to put a fishbone of a match together, but we're often not explained why. Why are we doing something? And I think if we can comprehend why, we can put just as much emphasis on why and what we're doing at the beginning of the match that we can later in the match when we're doing the more high impact moves, the more fast pace, right? And there's a lot of catch-22 in wrestling. There's sometimes where you got to leave space, but you left too much space there, or you need to go slow here, but you need to go fast there. And it's hard to delegate that because it's not the same learning opportunities that generations before us had. And in my career, I've been very fortunate enough to have multiple tryouts in front of WWE personalities, talk to many WWE personalities, some that are in charge now, some that have been in charge in the past. I've been very lucky to be around Ring of Honor, to be around New Japan, to be around Noah, and to be around some of the other smartest minds in wrestling, other places. And I always did my best to ask somebody who was more experienced than me to watch a match and give me some feedback, or even less experienced. If I came back and somebody was watching the monitor, hey, what did you think? What worked? What didn't work? And that's also something that's missing in wrestling. But I think that's missing because so many people are so used to a veteran mind just immediately saying, that sucked, you need to be better, and not detailing reasons. Now, I can watch a match and say, well, there was a lot of things that I think need improvement. Improvement is important. It's okay not to be great. And the reason why is if you don't know, you don't know, right? If you don't know something, how are you supposed to know that you're not doing something? So I'm hoping these videos will help because, man, there's some really great wrestlers out, and I hope the future holds even more great wrestlers. So let's start. And before I start, I want to talk about something that I'm going to cover. I'm sure anybody that's watching this is a hardcore wrestling fan, and they're very familiar with Dax Harwood, and you probably follow him on social media. And one of my favorite posts he makes is when he has a video of his lockups. And man, what a lockup. Did you see that lockup? And lockups, unfortunately, are something that people don't put enough emphasis on, of working on. How should a lockup be? What does a lockup represent? How should we do a lockup and make it show that feeling, that emotion to the fans that drive the emotion out of them to react? What is it that we're doing? Why are we doing it? And what is it that we're doing? But besides the entrance, besides the bell ringing, what is the first thing we normally see in a wrestling match? That would be the circle, right? I covered this. You ever do that little twist and somebody goes, why would you turn your back to your opponent, blah, blah, blah. But they're not telling you why. So what is circling? And most importantly, why do we circle? Now, I personally don't circle. I'll take a couple steps forward to the center of the ring and I'll stare down my opponent because I feel that fits me. So this, again, is something where you can play with it. You can make it your own. But that scenario, before the lockup happens, before anything happens in the match, why are we circling around? Well, to circle around, what you're supposed to be doing is eyeing up your opponent. One, in your mind, and this is where your body language counts, your facial expressions, in your mind, the thought process should be, what is my plan of attack? If the guy's bigger than me, do I lock up with them? For me, if I'm wrestling somebody bigger than me, I'm going to lock up with them because me, as Michael Elgin, believes that nobody's going to be stronger than me. So I will lock up to test that theory. Maybe I'll call for a test of strength. But you understand there's many options here. Maybe I'm wrestling somebody very small and they look me up and down and go, I don't think I should lock up with him. The body language and facial expressions should show that. That's what's missing in this. We circle around and you're kind of gauging, maybe I'm watching his footwork. Maybe he's rolled an ankle prior to this match and he's limping a bit. Maybe the right knee hurts. Maybe he's favoring the left knee. Maybe he's dipping his shoulder because he's got some neck pain or some shoulder pain. Maybe he's doing this when he's circling around because his arm hurts. Now I have a plan of what to do, and that's super important, right? I've eyed up my opponent. I'm looking at him in the eyes. I'm looking at his body. Where is his body language showing me? Is it showing me a plan of attack? See how crucial circling around is? But if you've been trained and been told to start a match, where you just circle around, guys, and lock up, right? And you just circle around and you move a little bit too quick and you dance around. But the meaning behind a circle and why we do it is to eye up our opponent, to see what our game plan is going to be. And that is crucial because that can set the tone for what people are going to see. And then comes the lockup. And why is the lockup so important? So, again, why do we circle around? We form a game plan. So maybe I'm going to duck under and grab a waist lock. Maybe I'm going to duck under and try to grab a headlock. Maybe I'm going to lock up and try to push him off. Maybe I'm going to lock up and throw him off. Maybe I'm going to lock up and back him in. Whatever the game plan is, this lockup has to show the intensity of what? Why do we lock up? We lock up because we are jockeying for position. We are trying to get the upper hand. So the circle, you try to pick your spots. Okay, my game plan is I'm going to lock up. Then what am I going to do? So that lockup, you got to come in fierce. You got to come in like you're wanting to be in a fight. And the struggle and the moving around and this is the struggle of who is going to grab the first hold. So if you just lock up and grab the arm wringer, we're not showing that crucial part of, okay, we got two wrestlers. Who's going to grab something, right? That is what a lockup is. That's why we lock up. We lock up to get the upper hand. We lock up to jock for position. We circle around to see our game plan. We lock up to set our game plan in motion, and then we're off to the races. But the body language and the facial expressions have to show that. Now, by me just explaining it that way, I want honesty. Whether you feel comfortable posting on the video or you want to send me a message via Facebook or Twitter, if you have my number, please tell me if this helps you understand why we circle around and why we lock up. See, the why is the most important thing in wrestling. To me, wrestling is a puzzle. Okay, we have a picture that we know we want to put together. But if I grab the centerpiece and try to put it in the corner, doesn't fit. If I try to grab the corner piece and I put it in the center, doesn't fit. So these videos are going to put this puzzle together, but not only is it going to put the puzzle together, it's going to tell you why this piece goes here, why that piece goes there, what our body language and our facial expression should be showing. And to me, in my career and people that I've given advice to, I think unanimously we all feel the why helps us perform better so that the crowd can react better. Thank you for tuning in to episode 1. I hope that I've articulated myself to a point where you can fully grasp what I'm saying. And hopefully you watch this before the weekend, and if you have a match coming up, utilize it. See if it stands out, because I know for a fact anytime a new person comes to wrestling and they watch a show, the biggest feedback I ever get is, I don't know what it is, but what you do looks different than everybody else. And it's because the why is just as important as the what. And the second I step through that curtain, I'm on. That's me. You will never see me not be Michael Elgin when I come through that curtain and get to that ring. That means my first step out of the curtain is just as important as the last move I'm going to do in my match. I put importance on everything I do in the wrestling world, and more specifically in the wrestling ring, so you can't see through what I'm doing. Now, I'm using myself as an example, not to be egotistical, because I can't speak on the behalf of anybody else's thoughts and feelings of what and why they do. Clearly, there's an amazing amount of spectacular wrestlers out there that I'm sure all know this, or this is a reminder. It's like, I know that, but I don't always utilize it. And that's what these videos are for. So thank you for tuning in. And I hope later this week you'll tune in to episode 2. Have a wonderful night, guys.